It's Black History Month, the shortest month of the year. The only month corporations acknowledge that black people exist. The month the FBI tweets nice things about MLK, despite once sending him a letter urging him to kill himself.
People of color in America have been struggling with the actual account of their true identities. After being labeled a race of people under certain classifications based upon skin hue, the complexity of learning their background, heritage, and culture was relied upon the Western European settlers that won the hundreds of war invasions that took place immediately in the year 1492 and beyond. The inability of governments of America and Europe to come to grips with their dark past and allow the Aborigines, who are natives to the land of America, as well as the descendants of everyone else involved, the healing required to move forward is not only a denial of basic human rights, but a telltale sign of the type of current racism, economic neglect, and mistreatment that will surely come to light during this generation of life. The threads of these ancient cultures of the Aborigine people, having existed here for tens of thousands of years prior to the arrival of the Europeans, must be preserved, strengthened, and woven back into a quilt that tells the unique story of not only their past, but of their bright future as well.
What's up, Authentic fam? Welcome back to Authentic Alphas and another authentic conversation. So today I'm gonna go ahead and knock out another special request, and this gentleman wants to stay anonymous. Trust me, I understand why, as this particular topic I don't even like discussing myself, because most people are just willingly ignorant and they make it a really hard conversation to have. I get really frustrated and aggravated, and I have since my youth. So I've learned a long time ago that I'm gonna always be dropping jewels. I'm always gonna be dropping gems. Most of them are gonna be for free. But unfortunately, you can't feed jewels and gems to swine. And most people nowadays are about as dumb as pigs. Now, as offensive as that may be to say, it's by design. The establishment has been working hard for hundreds of years to dumb down the population, take away independent thought, deductive reasoning, rationale, and get people to purely believe what they've been conditioned to think and believe for however many generations, centuries, whatever you want to call it. This has been going on for a very, very long time. But without further ado, what I'm going to talk about today is basically, in the simplest form, Aboriginals, who were the first people in particular lands throughout the world. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the suspense right now. Those would be so-called black people, okay? People of very dark hue, very dark skin complexions, and I'm talking about the entire world. I'm not going to say globe, because another shocker, I don't believe the world is round. Now, I'm sure people want to argue that, they want to debate it, they want to call me idiot and all kind of other things, much like people call me names because I don't refer to myself as black. Now, of course, these are small-minded people that don't even understand why I don't refer to myself as black and why that is not a term that anybody should adopt. But this is what you got to deal with when you're dealing with the ignorance of the masses. All of a sudden, I'm an idiot because, you know, somebody doesn't understand why calling themselves black is a no-go, right? Then you get the shaming language. Oh, you think you're better than black people? You have the nerves. You have the nerve to not subscribe to black. All right, idiots anonymous, if you want to be black, go ahead and be black. But this video is for the gentleman that went out of his way to actually contribute some money to have me discuss it. Otherwise, I wouldn't, because it's fallen on deaf ears, and I'm quite frankly disappointed with the ignorance of the quote-unquote black population in America. It's really, really sad. It's pathetic, and it's what's holding these folk back. All right? That's how I feel about it. I'm not filtering it for anybody. So the clip that you already saw was from Dean Calloway. And I am very, very appreciative that this brother exists, as majority of his information is far from new to me. I've been hearing this stuff since I was a kid. There's a lot of people in my family that are very, very familiar with roots and where they come from as far as other people. My family is actually pretty mixed, although we're all from Jamaica. I have family members that are Indian, I have family members that are Chinese, and I have family members that are what you folk would call black. Fucking idiots, man. But anyway, Dean Calloway is just like a shining beacon of hope, because whether or not he's going to be able to get a majority of so-called black people to wake the F up, at least he makes it easy for me to go ahead and offload that headache to him and his phenomenal work that he's been doing over the years. So he is like a super blessing to me. He's one of the few people that are, I think, using the internet in the best possible way to try to get the word out to people, at least the people that want to know the truth, that want to stimulate their mind and think for themselves. And his slogan is actually, "I'm just here to make you think." And I borrow that from time to time quite frequently, because majority of my work is just simply trying to get people to think for themselves. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I don't care whether or not you believe me. But what you aren't going to do is be calling me all kind of names just because your mind is as small as a peanut. All right? So for those people who are like genuinely interested in this type of information and actually want to know the truth and aren't lazy and simple-minded, right? You can go over and shoot over his channel and subscribe right now before you forget, before it slips your mind. Go to Dane Calloway's channel. I'm going to put majority of the content creators that I'm going to use in this video in the description. So just go over there and go ahead and sub to those channels if you really want to, you know, open your mind and be inspired to go look some of these things up your damn self. Because the same way that people like, you know, don't want to value free content from independent content creators, you guys cling pretty steadfast to this free information that was given to you by the public school indoctrination system. It's funny how you won't let go of that information that was free, right? Even though they're milking the taxpayers' money to teach you a bunch of lies, because that's why public school exists in the first place. Why don't you go look that up, okay? Because I took the time to actually understand, okay, the whole practice of public school and why it came to be. And it was not a public service. It wasn't to help out the ignorance of the civilians and the population. No, it was simply a machine put in place to brainwash people first thing out of the womb, so that when I say that the earth is flat, people have all this pushback for it, yet they spent zero time doing any type of studies or experiments themselves to try to prove that the world is so-called round. Nor did they ever entertain why they might be lying to you about something that's so insignificant while being so significant at the same damn time. Like, why does it even matter which shape the world is? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Okay? Why does it matter whether or not we allow people to call us black? Go look at the
and they're still suffering from it, especially in the Deep South when you look at these places where the people who lived are the direct descendants of slaves.
Yeah.
And then these are the same impoverished neighborhoods that no one's ever done anything to try to fix.
Right.
So how do you fix it?
You first have to start with the subconscious mind and the black mind. And the problem with the black mind is the fact that the black mind starts off with a defeatist mentality. From the day you're born, you're taught the white man's out to get you. So you start off with a boogeyman. And then you're taught that you're a slave, right? So when your subconscious mind believes that the beginnings of your race is a slave, how do you aspire to be more than that? So in order to correct the black community, you have to teach black history, or so-called black history, or what I would say African history, in chronological order. Before we were slaves, we were kings. So how do you have a whole entire nation of 40 some odd million black people, and majority of them never heard of Queen Angola, who never heard of the Songhai Empire, the Mali Empire, you know, none of this stuff, right? King Mansa Musa. How do you raise a people's level of awareness about this stuff? And how do you elevate them to want to do things in life when they think they are a slave? That's the first thing that you have to do to help black people. You have to teach them who they are.
That expression, before they were slaves, they were kings. The problem with that is a king is a monarch, and a monarch is one person who controls giant groups of people. You can't have a bunch of kings. There's not a lot of kings. You can't have a nation of kings.
Correct. But that's very different from saying, you know, that we had 4 kings, right? Let's say there were just 4, right? That's better than saying Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and these free slaves.
Right.
All right, shout out to my boy Hotep Jesus. That's a brother I definitely love having conversations with, man. He's very, very, very deep. But he points out, you know, something that people should be asking themselves, but yet they seem to never ask themselves. And this is surface level stuff, okay? Why is it that everybody else's history starts from thousands of years ago, right, as far as the indoctrination system is concerned, but when it comes to so-called black folk, Somehow history starts just a couple hundred years ago. But yet, nobody's asking themselves that question. Nobody wants to talk about what was going on before Columbus got here. I wonder why. You ever thought maybe they're hiding something? You ever thought maybe the story didn't go the way that they told you in public school? You ever thought maybe Thanksgiving is a lot more sinister?
Well, it's difficult, I think, for people that were born in America and all their known ancestors are from America to even relate. Like, my family is mostly from Italy and Sicily, and some of them from Ireland. I don't relate at all. I visit Italy in the summer times. I don't relate at all.
Right. So then the other psyop is the fact that we were the natives. We were not brought here on slave ships. That's not economically sound. This
What do you mean?
Sense. So when Christopher Columbus got here, Christopher Columbus got to the Caribbean, according to a primary source,
right.
They basically said the first thing he did was take slaves. He didn't bring slaves. He took slaves from the island. He captured people. So when you have colonization, you got to remember the United States was only built 13 colonies at first, right? You think this whole land was empty? No, there were natives here.
Right.
But today we're taught that natives are some other people. No, natives are the melanated African being that has come here since the beginning of the Mali Empire. We're talking about 14th, 13th century. We had already come here from Africa.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. We had already come here
to the United States or to
this landmass we call the United States. So the way the ocean current works is it works from Africa, leaves out of West Africa, comes to South America and the Caribbean. That's just how the currents go. You don't need no paddle boat or nothing. The currents just take you there, and then you travel up. But we had already been here. All you got to do is look up the story of Sarah Rector. Sarah Rector is a wealthy so-called Native American. I think she was a Choctaw tribe or one of these tribes, but she was wealthy. And she wanted a VI pass to go somewhere. And they had her classified as a free person. Why don't we know?
Now, this is a point that I often try to make. Some idiot, which is recently in my comments talking about, oh, you never hear white people saying, don't call me white. Well, I'm glad that idiot brought that up because I bring it up all the time. Not allowing people to call you black is just as valuable as so-called white people not allowing themselves to be called white. Now, it's the same, bullshit, okay, that's behind both terms, but they were used for different ends of the spectrum. Okay, so black was given to us to disenfranchise us and to separate us from our roots and our histories and our individual cultures, because all dark-skinned people do not have the same culture. They don't have the same phenotype. They're not from the same parts of the world. And black was also used not only to disenfranchise us, but like I said, to separate us from the truth as far as our past is concerned and our cultures are concerned, to get us all to be grouped into one easily to control group of people. That's what taking on that umbrella term does. It erases all of the differences between these so-called black people and puts them under one umbrella. Okay, well, guess what? They did the exact same thing with so-called white folk. If you think that all white people in America come from the same place, then your mind, again, has to be as small as a peanut. Europeans in droves, okay, were migrating to America. They weren't all coming from the same part of Europe. They were coming from many different European countries, many. But the ruling class did not want these people holding on to their individual ideologies, their individual religions, their individual traditions and cultures, because people are hard to control and manipulate when they have their own set of standards, rules, values, morals, and traditions. But if you can erase all of that, now you can tell people what to do and think, which is exactly what's happening now when everybody's mad at Joe Rogan because he had a conversation using the N-word. Okay, that's people being able to tell you how to think and how to feel. But if you had your own understanding of your group of people, your in-group preference, okay, your tribe, your culture, your whatever, you would decide amongst yourself what to think, do, and feel. So white people are no better off than black people when they subscribe to a word that is associated with a color that has nothing to do with tradition, okay, values, culture, history. So white people have no idea where they come from either.
And I'm going to try to break it down from a pre-colonial perspective. Then I'll wrap it up and show you how it affects us right now, today. First, we must dodge the misnomers and understand that the so-called African American or the so-called black person with ancestral roots in America is in fact the American Indian. And remember, I use the word Indian because it is the legal term. If I was speaking to another indigenous person, I would refer to my tribe and they would refer to theirs. The American Indian is the indigenous aboriginal of the Americas, the original inhabitants, the Powhatan descendants, Anyanguias, Seminoles, Creeks. You might even hear some people in the indigenous community use the word Native American to describe the indigenous Americans. But when you break down the definition of a native, it completely leaves out the original inhabitants part. A Native American is a person born in America or associated with America by birth. So do you see the difference? A native is one who is born in America or associated with America by birth, and an indigenous aboriginal or an indigenous American is the original inhabitants. Anyways, I won't get into the details behind that particular topic because it's not the point of this video, but I would like to say that we've all been programmed and lied to, all in an effort to believe that the so-called Native American is the original inhabitant of these lands, when in fact, most of their ancestral roots is from Eurasia, Europe, and Asia. Now, some people do use this term because it's a term that's been tossed around and used for a very long time. So I don't want you to think that every person who used that word or refers to themselves as Native is someone bad, but I'm just breaking down the definition of the two. I just like to know the true meaning behind words and use the words based on their true and initial meaning.
All right, so that beautiful sister right there has a hell of a lot more patience for it than I do. But she's basically saying the same thing that I've been telling people for over a decade, well over 2 decades now. Stop letting people call you black. See, fortunately for myself, I was raised with that understanding. I was raised understanding why I'm not black, why I should not accept being called black, okay? I got it, because that was the first programming I got. I didn't have to, be called black for years first, and then later on someone tried to explain to me and break through the conditioning as to why I'm not black, okay? My grandparents were very much against that because they understood their ancestry. And this sister right here, she understands her ancestry. She understands. Now, another reason why none of this is new to me is because I was very close to my godmother, and my godmother was a Native American, not Aboriginal. There's a difference. But within that, with her family, okay, her mother and her grandmother, knowing their family ancestry, like they had it on record for hundreds of years, like before Christopher Columbus. So they know that they were already there. Now, when I show you a picture of them, nobody's gonna dispute it because they look like Pocahontas. They're Pocahontas-looking people. Okay, when she was younger, she used to get that compliment when Disney made the Pocahontas movie because she has that look. But here's the thing. Her mother also had explained to me that they were darker tribes. Like, her people know that, and they have it on record because that was a conversation as far as marriage was concerned, because of course people are attracted to different people as well. So there were people from her tribe that were lighter that wanted to be married to people of other tribes that were darker. So I had already known that, hey, there were dark tribes that were indigenous to the Americas long before Europeans started settling there. Mind you, Europeans know this, and they have it on record because Europeans were trading with the Americas long before Christopher Columbus. How do you think maize made it to Italy and these other European countries, or corn as we know it today? It's only found, and it originates in the Americas, but yet it was found throughout Europe and Africa. How? Because these people were trading with each other, okay? They were European coins in America long before Christopher Columbus. That's a completely different time frame that they were using those coins. So how could those coins have gotten there before Christopher Columbus if he was the first European there coming from Spain? Come on, man, you guys got to use your brains.
The true meaning behind words, and use the words based on their true and initial meaning. If any of you all love the etymology dictionaries or the really old dictionaries, you understand where I'm coming from. So please don't take that part the wrong way. I also like to use the real meaning behind these words because to new people, it can be confusing. It can be confusing to hear somebody say I'm Native American and then somebody say I'm Indigenous Aboriginal. It's like, what's the difference? Why are they using different terminologies? But anyway, I'm going to leave some helpful links in the description box to talk about that a little bit more. So moving on.
Like I said before, etymology is important. If you're going to be using words, at least know what the words that you're using actually mean. All right? Not what they're commonly meant to mean or whatever. All right? Be literal with it. All right? Know what the words actually mean. Know the real definition of these words. Stop throwing words around that you heard them. All right? Do the research yourself. Don't be lazy-minded. There's so many people using words out of context, using words inappropriately. Good Lord, man. All right? I know women do it all the time with their feelings, but as guys, be responsible, mean what you say, and say what you mean. And the way to do that in the most literal sense, okay, or in the micro sense, is to at least know the actual definition of that word, which is very important. If you start to look into etymology and you start to study it, you start realizing that the truth is actually right there in the actual words that people use, or the words that we use in our language, but we have been conditioned to think of it as believing something else. Even like how the Bible is warning you about false idols, but then when you look at what we call our celebrities, we call them idols. And that's literally who the Bible is talking about, because nothing is new under the sun. As this video continues, I'm going to show you that a lot of what we're dealing with isn't new.
Most of us, we've been lied to. And most of us American Indians, we were lied to and we were forced to lie. Lie as we take on these misnomers like colored, Negro, mulatto, African American, and now black. And then forced, or be by the colonizers, to never speak our languages or to practice our culture. Now, this was the case for my family in Virginia, but I'm sure it happened all throughout the 13 colonies and beyond as their reach expanded.
Another thing I find interesting about people that push back on not using the word black is that the people in this country that we refer to as black, they've gone through the most label changes in history in the shortest period of time out of anyone. Like, as far as the different things that they've called dark-skinned people in America has been changed in a shorter period of time. It's been changed more times in a shorter period of time than anyone else in the world. Okay? Meaning no one else has been called so many different terms, referred to as so many different terms in a shorter period of time. Nobody. All right? Niji, Negro, colored, African American, black. And that's not even all of them. All within a 300-year span of time, we've been called all those different things, referred to differently. Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think there's so much changing and so much confusion in what we're referred to? Don't come in my comments, man, telling me that I'm off the rails. Don't call me in the comments talking about I'm tripping. Oh, you don't even consider yourself black, so you can't talk on black people. Before I move on, let me let y'all in on a little something. The reason why people around the world don't respect so-called black people, it's not because of the color of our skin. It's because of the level of our ignorance and our mental weakness, and how little we know ourselves, and how easily and abundantly we are manipulated by the so-called white supremacy in our country. That's why they don't respect us.
In this video, we will be exploring evidence that proves that the first Americans were African.
African empires in ancient America tells the story of the numerous African groups who colonized Mexico, North and South America. Today, most people believe that African people never voyaged outside of Africa except as slaves. This is false. The Dufana boat discovered in Nigeria dates back to 12,000 BC. And hundreds of ancient African boats have been engraved on rocks in the Sahara Desert. Boats from Megan, Egypt, and Meluha, Kush, East Africa are mentioned in the Sumerian cuneiform text.
Evidence suggests that ancient Africans sailed to South America and Asia hundreds of years before the Europeans. This evidence debunks the propaganda that Europeans were the first to sail to the Americas. Many ancient societies in Africa built different types of boats, from small vessels to large ships that could carry up to 80 tons.
Africans have a long tradition of sea exploration and founded many of the major American civilizations, although many people have heard about the possible discovery of America by Mansu Abukari of the Mali Empire and the giant Olmec heads of Mexico.
All right, so I'm about to get into showing you how it shouldn't surprise anyone to hear that, again, so-called blacks. I got to keep on saying that because, you know, unfortunately, there's nothing else to call these people, right? And that's by design. That was the point. To strip away anything that's actually accurate and just leave this whole black thing so that we'll just be confused and it be ambiguous because we don't even know who the hell you're talking about when you say black because everybody's this color. Everyone started off with a dark hue. Every continent, every country started off with a dark hue. So we're going to get into that. But that's why the originals being here in America shouldn't surprise you because the original people everywhere had a dark hue. Now, why I think it's really frustrating is because I'm going to point out the hypocrisy in people's logic. You don't like being referred to as monkeys and apes, but yet even monkeys and apes know that wood floats. Now, where am I going with this? If even primates can figure out that wood floats, why would it surprise you that the first boats were built by dark-skinned people? Why would it surprise you that any people built boats? Again, it's just wood floating on water. And when wood floats on water, it's going to go in the direction of the current. Now, which direction do you think these currents go in? Again, look it the fuck up.
It's performed on South Mexico's Pacific coast, the region with the country's largest concentration of Afro-Mexicans.
No es de la África la danza.
These dances don't come from Africa, they are Mexican, but these instruments are African and we make them ourselves. Now the black people have united with the local culture and mixed with the local people along this coast, and we multiplied, and there are now many black people here.
This country is home to more than 1 million Afro-Mexicans, yet these are marginalised and often forgotten communities. They represent around 1% of the national population. Mexico's 2020 census is the first ever to include Afro-Mexican as an ethnic category. Today, that original African culture still exists in a state dominated by indigenous tradition. Yet this stretch of coastline between Oaxaca and Guerrero states is an impoverished part of the country. There's not much tourism here, and local industry doesn't extend far beyond fishing and agriculture. Yet few black Mexicans leave to seek better opportunities, and those who do find the wider country not very welcoming. Indeed, for Rosa Hernandez, the lead councillor of Santo Domingo Armenta, the Afro-Mexican experience is isolating.
We're a vast minority in this country, so that's why many people have never heard of us. They think we're from another country. They don't consider you to be Mexican simply because you're black. But we are Mexicans, and it's only fair that they recognize us, that they value us as much as anyone else.
As the Black Lives Matter movement around the world seeks change and equality for Black Mexico, the challenge for these communities is still at the point of showing they exist.
So it might be surprising to most that Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, so that's North America, Mexico, South America, all has pockets of extremely dense black people. But everybody assumes that that's due to slavery. But what if it's not? What if there were black people in Mexico long before the Spaniards arrived? What if there were black folk in Brazil before the Portuguese arrived? What if there were black folk in America before the English? What if the currents from Africa went towards North and South America? Meaning that they wouldn't have to figure out how to propel the boats. They wouldn't even have to, row to get there. They could just ride the current. Remember what I said, wood floats.
I want to tell you a story of long ago, how we lived. As a child, I was always playing. At night, I slept with my fire as my only warmth. I had no blankets, and I slept on the ground. My mother used to collect a lot of edible seeds. She would grind the seeds on a grinding stone. Then she would fill a pitchie with the ground seed, mix it with water, and give it to me. My father used to spear emus.
Everything Joel Kubota has learned, and all his parents have planned for him, is about to change. His father decides to take him to visit the newcomers at a place the Aranda know as Indaria. The missionaries now say it is called Hermannsburg, after their mission back in Germany.
Let's deal with some more things that are hard for people to believe, although they accept other things quite easily. So it's not a mystery that the Aboriginals in Australia were extremely dark-skinned people. People have no problem accepting this, that before the British got there, there were very, very dark-skinned natives there. Also, all the neighboring islands, like New Zealand and all those type of places, again, very dark-skinned people. Most of them were killed, they were extinct, due to interacting with these Europeans and genocide. Australians were almost eradicated, but of course England had to pass all type of laws to try to protect the very small population that remained. But where I'm going with this, if Australia is an island off in the middle of nowhere, yet the first people there were extremely dark-skinned, only one of two things can be possible. Somehow those people just originate from there, or they migrated from Africa based on the reasoning that we're given, which is that all dark-skinned people came out of Africa. And then they say, well, all people in general came out of Africa. Okay. To me, that makes no difference. It makes no never mind. Because if the first people in Australia were from Africa, but yet we refer to them as Aboriginal Australians, then the first people being in America coming from Africa would not change the fact that they are Americans. I hope that's not going over people's fucking head. I really hope it's not. If the original people in Australia came from Africa earlier, it still would not matter. The original Australians would still be black. And so would the same be said about the first Americans. You guys got to really start thinking for yourselves, man, and not what your 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher told you. It's really not that hard to grasp these things. It's not hard. How is it that Americans are called Americans, but yet black folk in America are called African Americans? You don't see how this isn't making any damn sense? If they arrived at the same time as the white folk, or they arrived before the white folk, how would white people in America be American, but black people be African American? It's just semantics. They're misusing the words, and your brain is too small to figure this out for yourself. Stop believing what you're told to believe.
India is such an incredibly diverse country, it should come as no surprise that it's been influenced by literally almost every one of the surrounding regions. From the Orient to the Near East, it's easy to see the massive impact that these ancient peoples have had on this juggernaut of civilizations. But who are the original peoples of this region? A very contentious subject that has been debated over for hundreds of years now. The term Adivasi, or tribal, is used to describe those inhabitants of the subcontinent who have been recognized by the Indian, Nepali, Bangladeshi, or Pakistani government as being indigenous to the region, but this does not describe a single unified group by any linguistic, religious, or cultural perspective, not in the same way that others use the term indigenous. And although their history is still shrouded in mystery, further research and analysis is definitely painting an increasingly vivid and reliable picture on the ancient history and genetics of the world's most densely populated region. For all intents and purposes, although little to nothing is known about this previous indigenous population of South Asia from prehistory, historians and anthropologists have found the two groups that make up the bulk of the South Asian gene pool as ancestral North Indians, or ANI, and ancestral...
All right, so India, much like Australia, nobody's disputing that the original people there were extremely dark-skinned. And the reason why they can't deny it in these particular parts of the world is not because it's any more or less true than everywhere else. It's just simply that the lightening of the skin is at a different progression. All right? In Australia, you have people that are mixed with English and the Aboriginals that were there. They're obviously a lighter complexion, right? But there's still plenty of Aboriginal people there, or enough, okay, for it to be understood that they were there first. Same thing with India. You have enough dark-skinned people in the lower classes in India that it can't be argued that they were the original people there, but their culture is obsessed with lightening the skin, whether through marriage or through chemicals. Either way, it's the same logic, it's the same thought process. They're obsessed with lightening up themselves to fit into a higher status, whatever the fuck the case may be. Where I'm going with this is that other parts of the world are much further along with this process. And because of that, the lighter-skinned people outnumber the darker-skinned people, which is why they can cover up the true origin of their culture being originated by dark-skinned people. I'm going to get into showing you some examples of that, but just know that my overall point is that the countries that you think originated with white or light people did not. Those people just became lighter over time.
Providing you with more evidence of the existence of black European heritage throughout Europe into the 1800s. There is a widely accepted notion that the first large group of Africans, often referred to as Moors or Blackamoors, conquered a white-controlled Spain and Portugal, ruling it for 700 years, and thereby bringing Islamic control over the region. Now look, I am in total agreement with the premise that black Africans conquered Spain and Portugal. However, I believe, through my research, that Spain and Portugal were already controlled by black people or Europeans of color, and thus African Moors invaded what were already black-controlled countries and territories. Many historians today want you to believe not only were the Spanish and Portuguese people of white complexions, they want you to believe that African Moors also had white complexions. I have shown you that Europe as a whole was originally populated by dark-skinned people who immigrated to Europe from Africa thousands of years ago, as they expanded out across the continents.
Now, whether this is the first that you're hearing this information, it makes me know never mind. But yes, even Europe, a region of the world that's considered to be white, was originated by dark people. Believe it, don't believe it, take the time to look into it, don't take the time, I don't give a damn. Shout out to whoever sponsored this video. It makes it a lot easier for me because I really wouldn't be wasting my time talking about this, as I know majority of people just don't even want to get into it. They don't even want to believe that for one moment they're wrong about majority of what they think to be true. But yeah, even Europe, black folk there first. And you can go as far back as Timbuktu, which is where the first universities were, and that's who was training the first doctors, the first lawyers, all these different type of professionals that were in Europe in ancient times were going to Africa to train. They were going to Africa to get educated in these particular, disciplines. So what's going on here? Why would Europeans be going to Timbuktu in Africa to learn how to be a surgeon, or to learn how to be a doctor, or to learn how to be an architect? If we have ancient architecture around the world before colonialism that was stolen and claimed by conquering Europeans, where did they come from? Who built these monuments and these structures? If the first people in all these lands were dark-skinned people, and they had architecture that predated white Europeans colonizing these areas, then who built these things? It'll be something to think about.
I keep seeing videos on YouTube and Instagram regarding Asian people and their reactions to people of color, especially as it pertains to people most commonly described as black people. So let's dive in. The name of this video, as you can see, is Dark-Skinned Asian People, dark-skinned, or aka black people in the recent past. And obviously, there are still many Asian countries that have large numbers of brown or dark-skinned people. I'm mostly going to show you the Asian people that do not know or do not want to know that they are directly related to past relatives that were all dark-skinned. These ethnicities are Chinese, Korean, Filipino, and Japanese people. Here is another photo showing Chinese men and boys. Again, very dark complexions, very common for those times. Here's an interesting photo of an extremely tall man with other men all sporting dark complexions. I zoomed in on a couple. Now in this photo, there are several Chinese men. Check out the complexion on the man standing up. Yeah, not a tan. Some of these photos tend to be blown out, meaning the exposure setting was too high, causing some of the men closer to the camera flash to appear lighter than they really are. That seems to be the case with many of these old photos, so just keep that in mind as you're looking at different photos, not only from this video, but from other videos and sources online. Okay, so these two photos show cream. Very common in China, Korea, and Japan during this time period. You can also see that the man's complexion is very dark. No doubt her face was dark as well. So let me veer off for a minute and talk about why women painted their faces. There are several similar theories, but this explanation from reference.com summed it up pretty good. Right, so that reference goes on to read, pale skin is a long coveted sign of beauty in China, and skin whitening is an 18 billion a year industry in Asia. Although there are many modern companies competing in the industry, skin whitening is a tradition that dates back to the Han Dynasty. Traditionally, farmers and laborers had tan skin, so upper classes donned white face makeup to display their status. The association between fair skin and wealthy remains today. During the Sui and Tang dynasties, women applied red lipstick and white powder to their faces to have a pure white facial appearance. This look is no longer common on the streets, but it still can be seen in Chinese opera. In modern China, many women keep their skin light by liberally applying sunscreen, using umbrellas on sunny days, and wearing face masks at the beach. Skin lightening is also common. In a recent survey, 40% of women in China, Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan said they have used skin lightener in the past year. Dermatologists offer facial peels and laser treatments, which aim to lighten the skin. In addition, there are many pills and herbal concoctions on the market which promise to help lighten the skin. Such companies have received criticism for their unsubstantiated claims and potential health risks.
China, Korea, Japan, all the other Asian countries that you could think of, populated by dark-skinned people first. I know it's hard. It's really hard to understand. It's really hard to believe because all the images that they've shown you of Asian people has always been light people. But you have to ask yourself, how long has photography been a thing? How long have people been taking pictures versus painting pictures? How long has it been since the process of whitewashing in Asian countries started? Did you ever think maybe it just started so long ago that where we are today, there are barely any dark-skinned people left in those parts of the world because the motivation has been to get lighter over time, and it's been a lot of time? My grandmother is actually of Chinese descent. She was born and raised in Jamaica, but her parents were from China. Now, for her to marry a dark-skinned Jamaican, her parents were very, very upset about that. They actually disowned her for marrying a quote-unquote black man. But they also knew that in their past, they were also black. They knew that. They were ashamed of it, and they were trying to breed lighter, to constantly breed lighter. Now, this is not something that's like isolated to any part of the world. Almost every culture on the planet is trying to lighten up. That's what they're trying to do. And they encourage their children to marry lighter. Even Asian people encourage their children to marry white folk when they go to different parts of the world, whether it be Europe or the Americas. They are in more support of their daughters and their sons marrying white people than marrying their own. But they are adamantly against their children marrying black people because it's looked at as going backwards. It's looked at as downgrading rather than going in what they consider a positive direction, which is breeding lighter. So let's get into that.
And people sought the acceptance of Europeans or white Latinos. The following portrait is a great example of this, as it shows a Brazilian family becoming whiter, exemplifying the Afro-Brazilian reality as a whole, as a grandmother celebrates the cleansing of her grandchild's blackness. Although this has historically been true throughout Brazil, many Brazilians, especially today, are beginning to remove that stain of self-hatred and embrace their African ancestry. There is no doubting the unique history of Afro-descended people in Brazil.
So real quick, I want to add that there's absolutely nothing new about this. So in contemporary times, you have people bleaching their skin and doing all these things to try to appear lighter. But what I'm trying to show you is that this was going on hundreds of years ago and even thousands of years ago. But what I want to show you is that not only was this going in the direction of people wanting to imitate lighter-skinned people, This actually first originated with light people imitating darker people. Now, why would that be the case? For the same reason that darker peoples want to appear lighter today is simply because the ruling class is white people. What if at one point in time, the ruling class was dark people? Would you not get the same effect? White people trying to appear black or imitating black features? Has anybody ever wondered why, like, Buddha has these particular texture of hair that doesn't seem to fit in with Chinese people? Yeah, Buddha was black. They whitewashed that. You'll see what I'm talking about.
When the color of your skin can determine your future, how far would you go to be lighter?
Having a light skin, I think it is important here. Skin tone matters nowadays, and they prefer the white ones.
When I was younger, they would always call me pretty but dark. Whatever that fair girl embodies in my head is just someone that's a little better than me.
Skin bleaching, also known as skin lightening or whitening, is a global market expected to grow to over $24 billion in the next decade. Advertisements peddling products can be seen across the globe. Asia holds the lion's share of the market, and at the heart of it lies the Philippines, with one of the highest rates of use in the world. The Philippines is a country on the economic rise, and its new money fuels the possibility of rapid social mobility. One of the most popular strategies to get a leg up is skin bleaching.
Here in Senegal's capital, Dakar, two standards of beauty compete against each other. While natural beauty is of course a general standard worldwide, here, bleach plays a big role in the beauty process.
We have to realize that the narrative has been controlled by white supremacy since the late 1700s, which means white supremacists have put forward their version of the truth. Now, in order for them to do that, facts had to be skewed, evidence had to be destroyed or hidden, and paintings had to be overpainted or recreated. So due to miscegenation throughout the years prior to the early 1900s, many families that traditionally had dark complexions now have light complexions, aka white complexions. If you research European family genealogy websites, you will find white families that have historical records that mention family members that have swarthy or dark complexions. Oftentimes, the family will ignore or make excuses saying these family members with dark complexions meant that they actually had only dark hair and dark eyes. What stands out to me is other family members of that same family with the same descriptions of dark hair and dark eyes are not described as having dark complexions. So there's a major contradiction there. And then many families will just gloss over it altogether. They'll see the term swarthy or dark complexion and they won't even talk about it or mention it.
All right, so there's a lot more examples and proof of black ancestry in European countries, but most of it is through literature, and we know you guys have short attention spans, so if it's something you got to read, people, aren't as interested. If you want to hide something from someone, hide it in a book, if that saying ain't true. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and shotgun through the rest of this presentation because I don't really think that going into it extensively is the best route. I think what we need is just people to be inspired to think for themselves so they can go out there and do the legwork themselves, right? I don't think anybody should really be exhausting themselves. I don't think this is a point that's really difficult to make. It's real simple. What they've been teaching you is not the truth. They've been lying, and the agenda as to why should be pretty obvious, and if it isn't, then start digging. Because there's a lot more to it. It gets a lot deeper, but that's where it starts to get really sensitive. And I don't want to get into the material that's too sensitive. So just telling people that, listen, there were black folk here first. Some people are going to be able to digest that. Some aren't. Some people don't want to come to terms with the majority of what they think to believe is actually not true. It makes them have to question everything, which they should be doing anyway. But I think people just like to be lazy. People don't want to be forced to have to do anything that takes effort. Ignorance is bliss. But like I said, when you start going down that rabbit hole, it does start to get rather offensive. And the truth usually is. It's usually going to offend somebody, right? But as far as there being white people that know that they have some ancestry that's non-white. There's a lot of people who do know that, and they try to keep it hush-hush. But regardless of your skin color, your skin tone, I think it's your responsibility to learn as much about your family as possible, dating back as far as possible. The more you know, the better for you as an individual. You know what I mean? That's how that works. But right now, we're going to take a look at the origin of a lot of the traditions that we just accept on face value today.
All right, so according to dictionary.com, the word imitation means 1, a result or product of imitating, 2, the act of imitating, 3, a counterfeit or copy, 4, a literary composition that imitates the manner or subject of another author or work, 5, biology or mimicry, 6, psychology, the performance of an act whose stimulus is the observation of the act performed by another person. And the last one is number 7, psychology, the copying of patterns of activity and thought of other groups or individuals. Also, what I thought was important on dictionary.com is the phrase, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. To imitate someone is to pay the person a genuine compliment, often an unintended compliment. Okay, so you will come to understand why I share this phrase with you as we go further into this video. All right, let's take a look at some of the things from European history that I think have been imitated from Black European nobility. And the first item we're going to look at are various European wigs and hairstyles. Also, let me just give you a disclaimer. I'm not going to go fully in depth on each item. That would take way too long. I'm going to give you some facts, but really it's going to come down to your common sense and observation skills. Okay, so the time period I'll be talking about here is between the 1600s and actually up till present times. So I'm sure many of you have seen short wigs and long wigs like the examples from Google Images that I have here on the screen right now. They are known as perruque, and these wigs were generally made from horsehair. They've been worn by British judges and attorneys, or barristers as they are called in England, for centuries. They were also worn by court officials throughout the British Empire in countries like Malaysia, New Zealand, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Ireland, Scotland, up until recent times. So from what I've read, many courts have recently gone away from the practice. And according to chamberstudent.co.uk website, it says judicial wigs today are normally made of horsehair. Henry III of France made them on fleek in 1574. And by the 1680s, anyone was sporting these hairy hats. They were originally used to keep hair clean, but people got all competitive and, as ever, bigger meant better. I don't agree that the reason these wigs were worn had anything to do with keeping someone's hair clean. I believe it was fashionable because the nobility naturally had these hair textures and styles. You know, maybe it's just me, but even back then when you wanted to keep your hair clean, you'd put a hat on just like you would today. Just like fashionable people today, for instance, maybe Beyonce, Kylie Jenner, or LeBron James, people will copy their hair, clothing, and accessories. Call me crazy, but I think that's always been the case, whether it's 200, 300 years ago or now. When people see something and they like it, they're going to copy it. It's just the way people are. All right, so according to judiciary.uk, until the 17th century, lawyers were expected to appear in court with clean, short hair and beards. Wigs made their first appearance in the courtroom purely and simply because that's what was being worn outside it. The reign of Charles II between 1660 and 1685 made wigs essential wear for polite society. So basically, if you're going to be in polite society, you want to fit in. So you're going to copy whatever's the norm. And if the king's wearing something, hey, guess what? We're going to wear it too because we want to be just as bad as him. Now, I doubt many of you have really taken a good look at these wigs up close and then wondered why they were made to look like they do. And then something that just really jumps out at you right away, and it's pretty obvious, is that wigs were made to cover up someone's real hair. So if your real hair that you're covering up is not in fashion, whose hair is actually in fashion? Well, you know, let's take a closer look at these wigs. Here you can see on the screen 2 common short wigs. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you can see the real texture of these wigs. Okay, so what I immediately notice is that this hair mimics many Black people's natural hair texture. Now notice that I said many Black people because we should all know that Black people come in all shades and all hair textures. But this is kind of like a general texture. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the long wig. Do you see the texture of this wig also? It mimics the general Black hair texture. Even the long side pieces mimic a person with very long curly hair. So if the English were all white people with straight hair or even slightly curly hair, why would wig makers choose this particular hair texture and not mimic a texture that was straight and stringy in appearance?
So this next clip right here is for all my sisters out there wearing wigs and weaves and, you know, putting somebody else's hair on your head. I think you'll find this quite interesting to find out who was imitating which culture and which nationalities and races first.
1660 to 1685 made wigs essential wear for polite society. So everyone that was anyone were wearing these wigs, so much so that it became customary in courts for hundreds of years. Not only that, King Charles made wigs essential wear. Think about that. Why would the king make these wigs with their particular texture and style essential? Okay, I'll tell you. These wigs were mimicking the original black nobility in charge at that time. So this is that evidence I'm talking about, that evidence of black European heritage. All right, so let's move on to another hairstyle that was common with women in European societies during the 16th century, well into the 18th century. Just to let you know, many of these images were taken from Pinterest.com and Google.com. Now this first image is supposedly Elizabeth, daughter of James VI, son of Queen Mary. As you can see, her hairstyle is bundled up and combed up into an afro. You can also see jewelry in her hair or on her hair, and they look like pearls to me, with gems. And each one of these images I'm going to compare with another image of people that have this natural hair texture and style. And now I want you to ask yourself, why would these white women choose to have this particular hairstyle and texture? All right, so let's move on to the next image, and this image is of Lady Mary Sidney. She was the Countess of Pembroke. And you can see her hairstyle is, again, like an afro, and you can see the texture there as well. Very tightly curled hair.
So as we can see, cultural misappropriation is nothing new. People have been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. Nothing is new under the sun. All these lies are ancient lies. The only thing that's changed is the technology in which they disseminate it. That's it. Now they have, you know, the internet. Before the internet, it was TV. Before TV, it was the radio. Before the radio, it was the printing press. And before the printing press, it was just simply you were forced to accept certain things by the threat of death. All right? So it's really sad when you people are just willingly calling yourselves black when your ancestors were literally forced to by threat of death. That's how they first got indigenous people to refer to themselves as all these different terms and to give up the oral tradition, to give up their languages, to give up their religions, and to give up their family ancestry. They were forced to stop passing that information down from generation to generation by the threat of death. That's what it was, all right? So now when we actually have some level of free will, it's pretty damn sad when you're choosing to accept these terms and these labels, when now you can be your true self and, you know, you can be proud of the truth. You know what I'm saying?
I want to show you a comparison of Egyptian statues versus English long wigs. Can you see how the Egyptian headdress is imitated by the English long style wig? It looks almost exactly like the style the English adopted, only hundreds of years later. And I'm going to tell you later in the video why this comparison to Egypt is so relevant. Okay, so I'll pose a question. If these wigs are not made to mimic or copy typical white hair texture, whose hair texture are they imitating and why? Remember, I read to you the quote from judiciary.uk.com that said, wigs made their first appearance in a courtroom purely and simply because that's what was being worn outside it. The reign of King Charles II from 1660 to 1685 made wigs essential wear for polite society. So everyone that was anyone were wearing these wigs, so much so that it became customary in courts for hundreds of years. Not only that, King Charles made wigs essential wear. Think about that. Why would the king make these wigs with their particular texture and style essential? Okay, I'll tell you. These wigs were mimicking the original black nobility in charge at that time. So this is that evidence I'm talking about, that evidence of black European heritage.
So when you look at the practice of whitewashing, it's a great example how absolutely nothing has changed. Whitewashing 5,000 years ago is no different than whitewashing today. The only difference is the technology. Before, they used to have to actually, you know, breed, you know what I mean? They had to keep on breeding out the darker skin by, you know, obviously mixing of the blood, which is pretty time consuming. Then after that, there was the paying artist to go around painting over all of the works of art depicting black people in positions of power and nobility. You know, just go ahead and paint that brown king, paint him pale white. You know what I mean? But how is that any different than coming out with a movie about some ancient king or pharaoh or whatever and just casting a white actor? It's the exact same thing. They're just using a different form of media, right? So instead of stories being told orally and then having, you know, paintings or drawings to illustrate these stories, now they just put it on the big screen and they shoot it with a camera and they cast an actor. But it's still all whitewashing is my point.
So I'm going to take some of the images, the real images of the black nobles, and compare them to the fake, whitewashed, artistic licensed counterpart. So we're going to start off with Berengaria, Queen of England. And as you can see, the difference between the real and the fake. As I'm sure you guys know, this is Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. The real version and the artistic licensed version. James Francis Edward Stuart, the son of King James II. King John VI of Portugal. Peter the Great. Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I. Albert of Prussia, the first Duke of the Duchy of Prussia, the 37th.
You'll see this going on in all works of art, all forms of media, just simply turning darker skin people's historical figures into lighter skin. And I mean, come on, bro. The most popular and famous of all was Jesus. So just think about that for a minute. They did it with Jesus. Why would they not be doing it with kings and queens and anybody else of any notoriety? What would be the difference? It's the same exact thing. So it's funny how you have so many people that struggle with accepting that Jesus was black. I mean, come on, dude. The mere fact that was even like a conversation or an argument to be had. And then it's asked backwards, because it's like, even when people kind of accept it, they don't really fully digest what that would mean. So if that's the case, then how much faith can you really put in all these churches and all these religious, structures and systems if they've been showing you false images intentionally? So if they're lying to you about the images, what makes you think that they're telling you the truth about the words? Why would the scripture not be infiltrated if the visual depictions are? And they make it their business to try to make sure they cover everything. They don't want to leave anything out.
Here is another example of them hiring professional artists to quote-unquote remodel, refurnish, revitalize, restore images. Now, as you can see in the background, brothers. Now, if you're on your phone, you may not be able to see this, but I've drawn a circle around and I've pointed 3 arrows next to it. In those images are the original dark-fleshed people. But you see how this lady is quote-unquote remodeling the images? Brothers, one more time. Remodel, refurnish, renaissance, restored. All is code word for whitewashing. We're going to paint these images like us. So the house of...
They want to make sure they get everything, right, under their control, manipulated, remixed, switched up, edited, and then fed right back to you to send the message that they wanted to send, to give you the ideas that they want you to have, and to hide the truth. So what I'm saying is you can't trust anything around you. They infiltrated the religions, and they infiltrated the education and the entertainment. So any way in which we get information to one another has been compromised. That means you got to go out of your way to find the truth yourself, because there's a conscious effort to convince you otherwise. Do the work. Stop telling people that encourage you to think for yourself that they're crazy and they're stupid and they're wrong, when your ass is the one that's misinformed.
BOX 318, a ready-to-use solution that produces a rust patina in orange, yellow, and brown tones. So keep that in mind, brothers. So these are the artifacts that uses those chemical solutions, and this is how they create that fake aged look. But we're going to read a little excerpt from the Real History www.com. So it reads, fake Roman bronze bust of a young white man. The bust shows no normal bronze weathering. The aged look is accomplished chemically, such as with the product BOX 311. So the difference between the original and the fake. So we're going to read a little excerpt we have here. So it reads, anatomy of an albino fake, using as example the Croatian Apoxiomenos. The Croatian Apoxiomenos is a bronze statue of an athlete. In 1996, a recreational diver came across a large bronze statue lying at a depth of 45 meters off the Croatian island in Losin, in the Adriatic Sea. This statue, which is thought to be a Hellenistic or Roman replica of a bronze original from the second quarter of the end of the 4th century BC, was recovered in 1999 by a Croatian archaeologist and restored. Visual inspection of the original and supposedly restored, in quotation marks, heads reveal many dimensional relationships which do not correspond. Most apparent is the following. Look on the right side. Notice the relationship between the ear, which is still well defined, and the hair. On the fake restoration, the hair sticks out further, is bigger. Then on the crud encrusted original, which should be the biggest because of all the crud on it. The restored head cannot be bigger in any respect than the crud encrusted original. That is not physically possible. Thus, what is called the restored head is a fake. And yes, brothers, when you hear the terms restored, refurnished, remodeled, so on and so forth, that is code word for fake artifacts. Racially ambiguous. Now they're going to tell you the reason why the noses and lips are broken off is due to religious reasons, which I'm going to cover later in this video. They're also going to tell you the reason why noses and lips are broken off is due to bad weather conditions. But what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at some of these statues and relics where the nose is broken off, and then we're going to take a look at some of the statues where the noses have not been altered, and we're going to see why they have to break off the noses and lips. So this statue here, as you can see, the nose has been completely eradicated. But as you can see, this statue is still in such pristine condition. You can see that the nose has been specifically targeted. It must be that bad weather they keep talking about. I don't know why it is with the bad weather and it seems to only target the noses and the lips, but completely seems to miss all the other parts on the statue. Or maybe it's due to religious reasons. But what the heck do I know, right? I do not have a PhD and I did not graduate from Harvard. Look at this statue here. As you can see, the nose has been completely decimated. But once again, brothers, look at the statue. It's still in pristine condition, and the only part that has been broken off is the nose. Now, why is that? Another statue or bust that is still in good condition, and the only part that has been broken off is the nose. The same exact thing once again. Here's two examples here, and as I'm sure you brothers already know, this is Snoop Dogg and Cat Williams, and as you can see, they have that straight parted hairstyle. Brothers, the same way our people perm and straighten their hair is the same thing that they were doing in their rulership in Europe. So brothers, this is Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, and as you can see, he has the exact same hairstyle as Cat Williams and Snoop Dogg. There's nothing new with our people. The same way our people style themselves today is the same way our people styled themselves in Europe during their rulership. And speaking of style, let's go tackle that. So take a look at this brother here. As you can see, he has on the fancy hat. He has on the golden earring in. His garments are fancy, and as you can see, they're multicolored. And in his hand, he's holding a golden chalice. So where have we seen this before, brothers? The pimp. Now, as silly and as funny as this may seem, this is where a lot of the dress code comes from. Now, a lot of our people are going to think that this style comes from tokenism and blaxploitation from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where they had the so-called black man dressed up as a pimp and doing a lot of degenerate stuff. Which is partly true, but this is not that's not the only reason why the so-called black man dresses this way. But a lot of our people do not know where certain things come from or originate because all they know is slave history.
All right, so that's my time. Like I said, hopefully I won't even touch on this again. But, you know, I'm open to the requests. You know what it is. Get in the description. PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, all that good stuff. Let me know what you want me to talk about next. But yeah, also in the description, there's links to everybody else's channel. These people, you know, they prioritize this type of information. That's what they're all about. So go over there. It's really not my cup of tea. It's just shit that I've known since I was young and find interesting. But I'm really not interested in trying to convince anybody. Dude wanted me to touch on it, and there's a bunch of idiots telling me that I'm tripping because I don't refer to myself as black, but that's just some shit you're not gonna be able to say to my face. So if you think I'm black, knock yourself out. Just, if you call me black, don't expect me to turn around and answer you. I'm just gonna ignore your stupid ass. All right, I'm out of here. Keep it authentic. Peace.